You know it's a good day when you got the pod father himself coming on the show. We got Josh Lloyd here in just about 2 to 3 minutes or so on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Welcome to this episode. I'm Dan Vespers, at Dan Vespers on social, at Old Man Squad on Twitter and TikTok, Old Man Squad Fantasy over on Instagram. Please, before you do anything else, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button. Think about a comment that you might post later. And if you're taking in the show any old place, please subscribe and drop that 5-star review, because every one of those little things, I know it feels annoying to have to do it every single time, but it actually does kind of snowball and help things grow. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Do ya? Get in on their $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of that $200,000. And when it's over, head into the online casino, play some blackjack, poker, or unwind with over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. Today, Josh Lloyd will be joining us to break down the results of a mock draft. I hosted an industry 9-cat slow mock. Technically, it is indeed a roto mock draft, but really, I wanted everybody to treat it almost more like a games cap league, roto, head-to-head, whatever. And I'll be talking to Josh about his decisions, how it led in sort of a roto bent, how it led in a games cap bent. What might he have done differently if that particular spot was a head-to-head league? Would he have changed his pick there? Would he have done the same thing? Josh had the second pick overall in this mock draft. And I'll tell you right now, Nikola Jokic went 1. So I think you guys can probably guess who Josh got at pick number 2. But you guys have waited long enough. 2 minutes is more than enough time for you to sit back in your chair, pop in the earbuds, or however the hell you're taking in this show. Let's bring in Josh right now. And there he is, Big Justice himself. How was Costco, Josh?
Boom! Dan, I'm here. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to talk about what everyone wants to know when they're at Costco. I know that everyone's been like clamoring and asking for this. I've seen all the requests. I've seen all the questions. You might not have seen. They go to a different school somewhere in Canada, but they've been there. There've been so many requests for this show, and I'm pleased to be able to bring here and bring you the boom or doom to talk about roto. Everyone's most viral topic.
Yeah, so I know that I should reveal myself. I have no idea what this AJ and Big Justice thing is. You told me about it like right before we went on air. Am I supposed to understand it? I feel like I'm too old.
No, I don't think anyone understands it, to be honest, Dan. But like, yeah, once you get into the Costco guys cinematic universe, there's no escaping. You're going to be talking about the exploits of the Rizzler. You're going to be asking Cousin Angelo what that smell is. It's going to be crazy for you.
I really like. May he rest in peace. My dad would have loved this crap. He loved Costco. We still celebrate his birthday by getting a Costco chicken on May 11th every year. I don't know what's happening in these videos, but if they mention Costco, he would have been. You will
love it. You will love it, Dan. It's gonna be an amazing experience for you. So I apologize to all the listeners of your show because you're not going to be putting out any content. You're going to be catching up on the lore of the Costco guys, of Mother of Big Justice, and how everyone rolls in that group.
How's everything else? How's the run up to the season going?
It's good, man. It's busy. It's good. It's just always trying to get things right as best as we can, and that's the challenge of this final 27 days before the season starts.
Yeah, we are running. It's count up time, man. We got what's training camp, like a week and a half away, less. It's like a
week. Media days in like four days or something.
That's crazy. And apparently Nikola Jokic still hates basketball. That's what I saw this morning on the interwebs.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the man definitely hates it. I've never seen him enjoy it.
The shtick is so hard.
I didn't
I did not mean to do that. I said it.
That's where we're going. That's where this show's headed. I just need to shift gears. It's a really easy gear to shift, Dan. But we are absolutely ready to rock and roll. Let's go.
Damn it! That's all I have to say about that. Stepped in it. Josh had the number 2 pick in this draft, and this was a 9-cat roto draft. But I do kind of want to approach it almost from like the game's cap being maybe the biggest part, and then roto being almost the second biggest part. Is there a way, like, before we even get into your pick, because you had the number 2 pick and somebody before you, that somebody being great Matt Lawson, took Nikola Jokic. So we already know where you're going with the 1. Was there a big difference in how you approached this roto versus head-to-head, or was the big difference more about the fact that you knew there was a game's cap element involved?
I think the way that you approach that there is really interesting, because I do a lot of this stuff, and I'm sure you do as well, that you sort of do some stuff on autopilot. So, okay, it's a roto draft. I sort of know what I'm doing and I know how I'm going to approach this. But I think you're right. I think the differentiation mainly is that games cap part of it, because if you are in a competitive roto league where everyone is fighting tooth and nail for all waiver pickups and they're playing things out all to the end, there is an ability to punt categories, to have a 2 or a 3 and finish at the top. It's when you get to situations where 3 teams stop competing and they're sitting at 30 roto points, 34 roto points, that the top teams have to be at 80 to win. But if 10, 11 teams are all competing, there can be 68s and 65s and 70s that get up the top because those points get spread more. So that leans more into that idea of head-to-head strategy building and all that sort of stuff. So the roto and head-to-head part of that isn't as far apart. The games cap part, I think, is probably the more further apart difference between the 2 default type of formats. Like, if I have a look at the way that even I've projected out the standings for this league, like, the teams at the top have got like 1s and 2s and 3s on their projected standings in categories, which is not what the general idea is in roto. But because we're all expecting everyone to play this out all the way through, you can get away with that.
Yeah. So Josh had Wemby with the number 2 pick. We don't even need to really talk about that. Freddie VanVleet coming back in the 2nd round. Lauri Markkanen, 2nd pick of the 3rd round. I don't know what everybody's beef is with VanVleet. Everyone knows my position on him. Everybody knows yours now as well. He's like, he was in the teens last year, and he's going in near 40 in a lot of public drafts. Do you have any idea why this is happening again?
Yeah, 2 things. They think that the Rockets are going to trade him. It's actually probably 3 things. People think the Rockets are trading. People think that that he doesn't score enough. And the 3rd thing is they think that there's no way he'll play 36, 37 minutes a night again this season. That's the reasoning that I've heard, man. There's no way he's going to play these minutes. They're going to move off of him so they can play Reed Shepherd, and he doesn't score enough points to make you competitive. That's the things that I've heard, which I get it. I disagree with 2 of those things. The scoring part I do understand outright, because we know how heavily concentrated scoring is in the top 50. There's four guys maybe who are 20-point scorers outside the top 50, I would say. And like a league average of scoring is 18 points. So like that's a thing, right? I get it. But I also think that, when you're putting Fred VanVleet at 40 and assists and steals and out of position blocks and really good free throws, it seems a no-brainer. His field goals are bad as well. That's true. There's another part of that. So maybe that's part of it. I don't get it. And last year he fell significantly, and he returned pretty good value on that investment as well.
Pretty darn good value. Were you considering anyone else at this spot? And I mean, I guess strategically with Wemby as your first, were you starting to think about immediately the field goal percent being a possible weak point and just kind of leaning into it?
I was trying to. One of the main things I was focusing on was, obviously I've got Wemby, so I'm feeling pretty good in blocks, but I was trying to make sure that I didn't lose a big advantage there. So I wasn't looking at blocks, guys, but I was always looking, okay, let's make sure it's not falling down too low in this scenario. And from memory, when I was making that pick of VanVleet, I did consider Damian Lillard, who you took on the next pick around, and I'm pretty sure I was looking at Paul George in that area as well. But yeah, I was mainly thinking, Wemby's field goal percentage, like, we know it's not great for a center, and I don't really subscribe as much to this idea of if someone is awesome at a stat or worse at a stat for their particular position, that it's a huge detractor or a huge positive, because in the end, we're not like scoring center versus center. Like, if I get this guy out of position or get someone else in a different position that's weak in that, as long as it all balances, I'm okay with that. So I wasn't focusing, because it's not like he's a 42% guy, right? And it probably rises. So I wasn't focusing too much on that. It was more just trying to make sure that I kept the advantages strong and then built up other areas based on where I thought certain categories and players were going to start disappearing off the board.
Lauri Markkanen at 26 is one that generally doesn't happen if there isn't a game cap, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. There's no chance. I wouldn't take him in round 3 unless it was this sort of a setting, because, especially not at the start of round 3, there's no shot that I would do that. I wanted to make sure also, again, like scoring, like this is where I need to get scoring. If I did take VanVleet, which I did, like that is probably a sub 20 point per game scorer. So I need to get a mid to high 20 points per game scorer, or potentially mid 20 point scorer in that round to be able to sort of balance that out. So I needed to really focus on getting that and helping to keep the free throw percentage up as well.
Is this a decision? And I sort of warned you that I'd be digging in on the strategic side more than the player side. So apologies for taking us down a little side path here again. Is Markkanen a pick you'd make even on the head-to-head side with the games cap involved? Because I know you're working on all these games cap head-to-head leagues. How does that sort of buttress up against the roto idea, or is it kind of the same both ways here?
It's the games cap in the head-to-head leagues that I'm running. While on the surface it does make it a little bit more similar to roto in a weekly decision type idea. Part of the concern with Markkanen is not missed games through the year; it's missed games in the fantasy playoffs.
Right.
It's the Jazz and the Blazers are going to be. We know that they are, like, this is what they do, and they have made no signs to improve their team this season necessarily. Although Portland did make at least one move to that, the Utah did not, and they are going to invent a fake injury for some of these players, Lauri Markkanen, at some point in March. Like, I feel really, really confident that is going to happen to Lauri Markkanen. It's going to happen to some of these Blazers guys, and the Blazers guys might get traded and get immune to it, but Lauri's not getting traded. That is just not happening. And if we get to March 20th, I would say there is a 10% chance that Markkanen's playing.
You've got Immanuel Quickley towards the end of the 4th round. Rather than asking you how you feel about Quickley, because the fact that you got him at 47 tells me you like him, I'm more interested in, after you've got this pick in the tank, what are you thinking about your team so far? Like strategically, what is the thing that's on your brain? You're saying, okay, this is the thing I need to try to do next. Or, like, I know you and I and and pretty much everybody, I think, in this draft just looks at a board and we're like, okay, that guy's a plus there, negative there, plus there, negative there, and kind of like mix and match. So again, strategically, what are you feeling after that Quickley pick?
As you can see, like on the way that I'm picking there, it is alternating forward guard, forward guard, forward guard. But it's really just trying to make sure I'm getting the numbers that I'm getting and seeing who's available and where am I going to get 7 assists or 8 assists as we come back around. There's not going to be many of those players that sort of sit around there. A bonus of maybe a 20-point scorer as well, and just making sure I get the things that I know that when I get to round 7 or when I get to round 8, where 7 centers are going to go off the board, but there's going to be like 1 point guard sitting there who probably gets nowhere near these numbers. I need to make sure that I'm getting those at that early stage and understanding when runs happen and when things become harder or impossible to be able to deal with. And I think that they're getting someone like Quickley there and making these decisions to take players at certain spots is largely just because, like, I know that I can't necessarily get those numbers later. It's not always about I have to have this guy or I've got that player. It's about like what makes sense here, because how do I fill that out later? And if I can't, then reaching doesn't really matter. And people will say that's a reach on Quickley, but I also don't care, because the point guards after it was Murray, who's not a high assist player at all. And then we're talking like Darius Garland, who I actually did consider at that spot. And then like who the hell else is there after that? Like it gets pretty low in the assist level
you
until
got
we
the
get
next
down
one,
to
basically.
Henderson. Yeah,
I think 2 rounds later, you got the next one in D'Angelo Russell, basically.
Yep. And he's a guy that I find myself unbelievably targeting nearly every draft, because in that area, like last year he was annoying. He got benched, and I thought, okay, Darvin Ham has made the call again to bench him after benching him in the playoffs, and then benched him again. I went, okay, so they're just completely out on him. Everything that I heard publicly and privately was that he was getting traded. So I was like, okay, I'm done. They've made the call. He's gone. We're out of here. And then he turned into Steph Curry / Chris Paul all at the same time, and was awesome. And now Darvin Ham's not there, and D'Lo is, he's great here. I really love it, because look at the board. Who the hell else are you getting in this area that gets assists?
And combination with other things as well. I think D'Lo is a weird value for the second year in a row, which is interesting because he opened earlier on that first Yahoo board and then slid like 15, 20 slots. In between those two names, you went Zion in the 5th. What's the thought process behind going with sort of a big field goal percent guy, lower free throw guy, slightly higher turnover guy, kind of in between here? And you still don't have a center even after 6 rounds. So what are you thinking again from that, like, how do I build my team perspective?
Oh, Dan, I'm going to stop you right there, mate, because I've got the best center in the entire thing, and I've got Victor Wembanyama. So look, I've got a center.
True. That is a
I've got the most center of all centers because it's just the way that Fantrax colors them in. So I'm okay with that. The reason I got Zion right is because, like we addressed it earlier, VanVleet's field goal percentage is pretty bad. Victor's is not super strong. Quickley's is not super strong, but all of them have very, very strong free throws, right? So when I get to that stage in the draft, I'm looking and go, who's going to really help these field goals jump up? Well, it's Zion, and he's got a chance to be one of the top 4 field goal percentage impact players because, like, I think his field goals actually can go up from last season, and we know the volume's there. And all my other guys are really, really awesome at free throws, so that actually offsets it. And when I made that pick, it put my free throws overall to like 82%. I go, yeah, pretty happy with that. I can absorb all of that, taking on Zion's strengths, and I'll deal with some of the other stuff later on. But it's all about that balancing act.
Your 7th round pick was one of your favorite players in the entire association, Vooch. And you and I have talked about this on a show already this year. We're both out on Vooch, but he's still on the board here at, what is this, 74? Like, you almost kind of have to. I know there's the kind of have to thing with him. At this juncture in the 70s, you almost kind of have to. But what does he do for your team build?
It was just rebounds. I'm pretty sure that I was looking for in this area. I wanted to make sure I wasn't completely, because there are going to be these guys later on, the centers, the Zubatzes, the Gaffords or Lively's or Kesslers or Pirtles, who are going to get those, but also bring a dip to my free throws. So I just wanted to make sure I could buffer that after taking Zion in the last round. And yeah, like, I'm not a Vooch guy lately, but it's not like I don't like the guy. Like, I used to be a big Vooch player, but I also recognize that he's actually really bad at basketball now, and he can't shoot and can't defend the rim and can't defend anywhere, and sort of needs the ball in his hands, and it's not conducive to good basketball. And at some point, that wears out, and it did. Like, I think most people realized last season that he sucked, and he might get some more touches this season, or he could be absolutely punted into the sun in playing a 20-minute a night Valanciunas role on another team at some point. So, yeah, I did grab him here. I don't feel super confident about it. I'm definitely not looking at him like where some people go, oh, it's Vooch, he's so consistent, he's just going to be a top 30, 40 player, because I'll absolutely not. No way would I do that. But here, whatever. I need the rebounds.
That's fair. Middleton, near the end of the 8th round. I am petrified of Khris Middleton and 2 ankle surgeries. You want to talk me out of that, or are you kind of with me on it?
I was a little worried about it. When I spoke to someone from the Bucks, they were like, is a relatively routine cleanup arthroscopy, not a ligament reattachment, not a significant problem. It's something that many athletes have done in the off season. They just a cleanup, but yeah, there's bits of loose bodies floating around that was giving him some pain. Like, he cooked in the playoffs, like, he was great, but there was a bit of pain there from a couple of sprained ankles, little bits of pieces they cleaned up, which gave me a level of confidence in that. Now I don't have confidence overall in his body. I don't have any of that stuff, and I think they'll be sort of cautious with his minutes through the season, but I wouldn't expect it's as cautious as they were last season when he played 27 a night. I think that they'll push that a little bit higher. And again, we're getting into this no risky sort of territory. And if I look at these guys, like, who could theoretically be a top 50, 60 guy in this space? And yeah, some of these guys, I don't think it's possible, but I think it is for Middleton. Like, he's got that part of his game that's possible.
Is this a part of a draft where you're thinking about team build at all, or are you really just hunting max upside now, starting at about the 8th, 9th round?
I think I'd probably look more into that at around 10. 8 or 9, I'll probably try to still just see where I'm lacking, or what I want to, or maybe I'm just lacking too much in an area and we can just forget about that and try and boost our scores in other areas. Also, just taking a look at other people's team and how far off am I from here and where am I in certain areas. I'm still probably doing that in round 8 and round 9, but still with an eye on, like, okay, if it works, like, could he go 25, 30 spots higher? Because that's, ideally we can talk about anything we want in fantasy. We can talk about this guy providing this value in this team build being the perfect situation. But if you just get guys who get 3 rounds of value ahead of where you draft them, you're pretty much going to win. Like that's hard to find those guys all the time. But if you can get people who just exceed those spots by significant margins, then you're pretty good. Like that's the most basic thing about doing all of this is like find guys who do much better than other people expect.
I completely forgot to actually introduce you on this show for who you actually are. I only introduced you as Big Justice. We're talking to Josh Lloyd, Red Rock _B-ball, host of Locked On Fantasy Basketball. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to slip into an accent there. How was it? Was it bad?
I didn't even know it was an accent because if it was any sort of Australian accent, it definitely did not hit the mark. But that's okay. What I found trouble saying it lately is pick and roll ball handler because I'm saying roll and ball, like pick and roll ball. Like it's all coming. It's all really, and I'm saying it too much. And like that's the one that's really getting me at the moment.
I'm just so flustered. I don't know what the hell to do with myself right now. It's
because your stick is too hard, Dan.
I know. The shtick was so hard. No, he's the lead fantasy basketball analyst and basketball monster as well. And he is, today at least, he is Big Justice. You thinking about team build, is that still what you were doing at 9 with Okongwu there? Or is that, again, hunting the... And I mean, I know, I get it. Like, I've said the same thing, and I'm sure you've had plenty of people yell at you anytime you say something good about Okongwu. I'm sure they're yelling, I can't do this a third straight year. But at the same time, like, he's being drafted pretty much where he finished last season in kind of a worst case repeat spot. Like, if anything at all happens to Capella, it could be better than that. But again, I don't want to get sidetracked about Okongwu individually. What were you doing here at pick 9? You just said you're still kind of filling in some team stuff at this juncture.
Yeah, we'll have a look at the greens as well in the last couple of rounds there, like Zubats, Lopez, Pirtle, Nurkic, Kessler. So, all right, this is it for centers. Like after this, there's not really much going on outside of like the Dallas timeshares. Like there's not a lot that's happening after this. So if I still wanted to get some bigs or someone with some strong field goals or some strong rebounding numbers or strong-ish and some strong-ish blocks, and just again making sure that I'm not sacrificing Wemby's blocks, not to say that I would lose blocks, but also making sure that I feel comfortable in winning. It's be nothing worse than having Wembanyama and then having to like scrounge out for waiver wire blocks by streaming in Eve Misi for one Sunday afternoon game to get 2 blocks to win the category. Like that sounds like a painful experience. So I just wanted to make sure I could get that in there. And the Okongwu stuff is frustrating. It's also, I find it frustrating that people will be like, "Oh man, you've told us he's been starting for 3 years." Like I literally haven't. All I've said is I think they should, but I also know that they won't. And I think that for a general rule, like we sort of said last year, was trending towards a minute split, and it was. Like it was like 20, 25, 24, and that's about where it was. And I think there is more chance of Okongwu starting this season. I'm not 100% sold on it, but I also think that we know which direction the two guys are going in terms of their career and improvement / decline. So yeah, I'll take him here. Plus, doesn't hurt the free throws.
Doesn't hurt the free throws. 10. Is this the round where you started taking some shots?
As you can see, my last 4 picks were all forwards.
All forwards? Full purple here.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember exactly the thought process. I'm pretty sure it was like, I'm not sure my rebounds really are stacking up where I want them to be, and there are no guards sitting out there that are feeling good in that area. So I'm not normally a PJ Washington guy, so that's surprising to see that I would have done that. No, I think I just needed a little bit of security in like who's an okay scorer, who's going to get some rebounds, who do I know is playing 30 minutes a night. There's going to be some fluctuations in shooting, but it was more just getting a bit of forward eligibility, but also who can rebound and score in this position, and there's not a huge amount of guys there.
I've heard you talk nicely about Andrew Wiggins. Well, not nicely necessarily, but as a possible late round guy, Andrew Wiggins, Noah Clowney. I don't know if I've heard you mention Aaron Gordon before in the 11th round. What's the thought process there?
I think it's just a doubling down on the Washington stuff. It's like who is here that will help me on rebounds? Like who will give me that rebounding edge that I am looking for on this team? Not that my team is I'm going to have a look at my squad overall, but I don't think they're a terrible rebounding team. But they're sort of middle of the pack, which is I've got myself ranked as like 4th best in rebounding, and that's sort of where I wanted to be able to push myself up to. So it was about like who's a rebounder, who's going to get me decent numbers, who's got a secure role in that spot. And one of the things that we've seen as a phenomenon over the last couple of years is that rebounds can be got, and then there's a stage where nobody rebounds the ball at all after about round 10, and then best guy can get averages like 3.5, and they just disappear. And I was acutely aware of that being a problem, so I just wanted to get another minute secure rebounder.
Thoughts on, I know this is an open-ended dumb question, but I just want to know.
Thoughts, serious. Sideline reporter, Dan Besbris.
I know, I'm really coming in hot. Thoughts on Noah Clowney and Andrew Wiggins at the end. I think we've talked about Wiggins before, but I don't know if I remember you talking about Clowney on my show at least. Do you feel like this is one where he can get it going right out of the chute, or is he, I feel like he's maybe one thing away, but where you sit with him?
Yeah, no, the boys were pretty like focusing. Coaches told us we've got to get back to basics and just really focusing on our game plan and do our own thing. Just really get out there. If we play the game the right way, things will come for us. It's more about focusing on ourselves versus our opponents, and like just really paying that attention. So yeah, really good message. We came out really fired up. I will give 90. Clowney. Interesting stuff from Sean Marks today and the Nets, which obviously happened after this draft, but talking about no position is guaranteed. This is a very clear development season. We'll see how all the roles shake out. And to me, that suggests that we're paying you a lot of money, but we do not care. We do not care if we're paying you a lot of money. Let us see what other guys have got, which is great news for Noah Clowney ahead of stiffs like Dorian Finney-Smith. And that is an upside play. Like we saw Clowney play forward and center last season. We saw him have a 7-block game, I think. And, there's been a few things that have come out media day the last 3 or 4 days that have been things that I've hoped or thought would happen. And then people have come out and confirmed them. And I'm really happy about that. So I'm happy about getting Clowney there because that to me, again, you can't decode everything perfectly out of media day. You can't do those things. Like it's very hard to be able to get all the accurate information. But there are things that coaches can say and can't say, or GMs, and they do and don't say. But when they go out of their way to say a specific thing, I think that's more important than if someone asks a question and they're just sort of like, maybe we'll see how it goes. Like that's not an answer. But if they come out and say, everything's up for grabs here, and we don't care about any of this stuff with money, and it's all about development, you go, oh, okay, that's where we're heading. And as for Wiggins, he sucked last season to begin the year, and the second half of the year he was better. He was okay. I wouldn't say he was great. I worry a little bit. Obviously, he has had plenty of off-court challenges with the illness of his father, who has now passed away. RIP to old mate Mitch. But how does that not free Wiggins of the stress of dealing with an ill family member? But could he feel more like a sense of closure, or does it impact him even further? It could go either way. But there's definitely something there to that I can't discount. That the impact on his game last season was still due to those family concerns and health of his father. And he's not great. Like he's totally okay in this area. And as the level of minutes consistency or security, even if he's only playing 27 minutes a night, that's okay.
Do you think, going back to Clowney, do you think he could start on opening night, or do you think they're going to try to do like you're the veteran, you get to do the final tour kind of thing first?
No, because no one gives a shit about Dorian Finney-Smith or Cam Johnson. Look, let's be fair. These are not Nets stalwarts. These are not long-term players. They are not. There's not one person. Sorry to Mr. Finney-Smith and Mrs. Finney-Smith and all their family. No one's rocking a DFS jersey out there going, man, can't wait to see my favorite Dorian get out there. Like no one's out there doing this. And Cam Johnson's a player who's been there a year and a half. There's no organizational currency. He's not like fan favorite. Let's line up out the door for Cam Johnson bobblehead night. Like there's none of that stuff happening. So while they're veterans as such, they've proven nothing. They're not all stars. They're not champions. They're not anything. They're guys that have been in the league for a long time. So there are certain situations where that is a real thing, right? But and they could still start, but I don't think there's necessarily we must let you start here and give you this opportunity to show what you do and say goodbye to the loyal 3 fans here in Barclays Center. I really don't think that is a significant consideration. It might happen, but it's not a specific consideration to me.
come for the hard shtick, stay for the absolute destruction of poor Dorian Finney-Smith.
He seems like a really good guy. I apologize to him. He's worked hard, undrafted legend, onto a really good role player on a good team. But like the Nets fans don't care, and that's just what it is.
We haven't destroyed Harrison Barnes on today's episode yet. We've jumped right over
undrafted. He's out. He's past it. He's past the. He's crossed the Barnes line in that the guy that gets drafted in leagues when he shouldn't, and now he's not even getting drafted in leagues. He's not there anymore.
Not even on the board anymore. Man, what sad times are these? Okay, strategic question for you. This is obviously a roto draft. What would you have done differently if this was games cap but head to head instead? I think
Markkanen. Yeah, wouldn't have taken Lauri Markkanen, no chance. Otherwise, might not have gone Middleton at that spot, honestly, because I suppose the games cap head to head part, that's okay. He's fine. Honestly, the difference is probably more. I wouldn't have been like, well, I've got these significant weaknesses. I need to strongly build them up. I would have been okay with letting that slide, but it's mainly just I just wouldn't have taken Lauri there. That's the major one. When I look at these picks, I go, yeah, I'd do Quickley there, and Zion and Russell. I do nearly all of these ones. I probably not sure about the security of like a PJ Washington or an Aaron Gordon. They probably wouldn't have been as important to me in a head-to-head scenario. But the big one is just I wouldn't have taken. If you had to put Lauri in that spot where I took Quickley, then sure, I would have probably done it. But I wouldn't do it where I took him there.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you said that. I didn't know what your answer was going to be, but I just did a show this morning where I looked at my own team, and really there were like 3 or 4 names where I would have done it differently if it was head-to-head games cap, and it was pretty much all of the guys at the end, because I took like Al Horford, who, I mean, okay, head-to-head, you could take him and just play him for the first half of the year, but games cap roto, you can drop him anytime any Celtic is resting kind of thing, and you have this, or games cap any format, I guess. You just keep him on your bench. You deploy him when the situation is right. Whereas unlimited games, you need to make sure you have guys you feel comfortable dropping in there every single damn night, / your last 2 roster spots being completely dynamic that you can just drop them and pick up anybody who has 3 games in 4 evenings, which I know you freaking hate that. And it's one of the big reasons that you're making this games cap push is to make it so that benches matter again, instead of just who can stay up till 12:01 a.m. and grab the guy who has the most games, right?
Yeah, like in a standard 10-3 format, 10 starters, 3 bench, there's no bench. Like you use every player every time that they're available. You might have a couple of start-sit decisions, maybe 1 per week you have, but there's no bench. And that's okay if that's the way the format is, and that is fine, that is what it is, but you have to acknowledge what the style of the game is. It's an accumulation game. It's let's get the most games in possible. Every position matters. You can't handcuff. You can't stash. You can't do any of these things. And it's another reason why when I'm talking head-to-head, I'm like, I'm not going to bother with focusing on turnovers because the name of the game is accumulation. So if I get 7 more games in, it doesn't matter if you had lower turnovers because I'm just going to smash in every other area, right? It's about accumulation. That's what the game is. But the game doesn't have to be that. And when you make adjustments to what the game is, then that we bring back different ideas and different strategies and different drafting plans and all that sort of stuff. But like, we just have to acknowledge, like, it's fine to say there's a bench, but there's not. Like, there's just not a bench in a daily changes league. And all of this, I'm convinced that all the things that we can talk about here, it's all because the way the game started, it started trying to mirror like a fantasy baseball scenario where it was like a weekly lock roto situation. So here's your starters, here's your bench, and the way we talk about it. But that's not how the game has evolved. But none of our thinking and setup has evolved with any of that at all, leading to evaluation and analysis of players and structures and plans that don't match the reality of how a game is played. So that's what I've been trying to do. But on that point, Dan, like, this is a free question for you when you talk to Raf later on. Like, we talk about roto a lot. Well, you talk about roto a lot when we talk about the differences in roto and head-to-head, and the name that always comes up is Giannis, right? Like, Giannis can go top 5 in points leagues or top 3 in points leagues and top 5 in category leagues, but most people will be like, in roto, yeah, I'm not going to do it in the top 4 or 5. Now, Raf's obviously taking him at 7, and I think it is fine to be able to do that. But what I often hear people say is that, like, I wouldn't take Giannis in the top 4, but I would take him if he slips to 8 or 9 in roto, I would do it. I'm sure you've heard that sentiment. You've maybe even said that sentiment. Like, where do we get to this stage that in a roto league that the damage that Giannis allegedly does to your team in free throws is the same if you take him at 4 or 8, correct?
Correct.
The negative is still there. So I think if Raf is taking him at 7, that is totally reasonable to be able to do that. And that's just head-to-head roto difference. But like if Giannis is slipping to the second round, sure, you've already got a first-round guy on top of that. But to me, it doesn't really matter if you're taking him at 4 or if you're taking him at 8. And you say, well, the other things can outweigh it, but they don't, because the reason that you're avoiding Giannis is because it puts you in too big of a hole for free throws. And that hole still exists if you pick him at 3 or if you pick him at 70. That negative impact is still there. Now, if you pick him at 70, you've been able to accumulate a bunch of other higher free throw guys before that. But if you get him at if you get him at 10, you haven't had any chance to get any other high free throw players. So taking him at 10 is the exact same as taking him at 2, or the exact same as taking him at 4. So I don't get the idea, because it's not like, well, if I've got really good field goals, that will mean that my 1 in free throws gets eliminated, because it's still there. So that's a question. This may be a philosophy thing, that we have this idea, well, if he slides far enough, I'll do it. I go, okay, but every first round pick in that respect is the same, being that is your best player, and that builds the base of your squad. And that's where I don't know, I've gone off track here, but talking about the strategic roto head-to-head differences. I think sometimes we maybe push the wrong direction on that idea.
Yeah, I think my personal feeling on Giannis is I just don't like to build around him in roto. I don't like to.
I think that's fine. I think that's totally fine.
I don't plan on taking him in the first round of a roto draft, which means I'll never have him in a roto draft, because he ain't going in the second or third. But I prefer to delay any possible punts in a roto draft until a little bit later on. I feel like you can kind of see where your team is going, take all these. You were talking about it, guys you can get who are better than their draft position by the 4th, 5th round. I often end up with a crappy scoring team. It's just the way I draft. But I promise that with my first pick, I'm not thinking immediately, I must punt points. I basically ended up punting points in this draft, and I started with Embiid in the first round, because I take guys like Miles Turner and Austin Reeves and Bradley Beal and Tobias Harris, and suddenly I have all these 17-point scorers, and I didn't bother to take the 25ers. Whatever. But it actually works. Not to get sidetracked by my own team. If you have a first-round pick who's an incredibly efficient both percentages guy, it actually makes it very easy to punt points, because he's doing all of your volume lifting. Different discussion altogether.
No, I like it. I think that is. Yeah, I agree. Like, I wouldn't take Giannis in the first round in roto. But my thing was more just to debate that idea of like,
in the first.
Yeah, well, if I take him here, it's I can't pass on the value. I'll go. Then the negative that you would have passed on it for is literally still the same. It doesn't reduce because you took him at 9, and you're still going to have those significant challenges. You can say that there are other players you prefer ahead of him, and that's totally reasonable. But the idea of like the negative is mitigated because I waited 5 spots to pick him, I think is something that maybe gets us into, or gets some people into trouble in terms of building their squads out, because that negative impact still remains. It's still there.
No, the only difference is maybe you get a better shot at a better player early in the second round, I guess, if you're taking him at like.
And go philosophy then, Dan. Like, who's the better player? Because we can sit here and you do it all the time, and we talk about the second round and go, man, I hate the second round. I don't like any of these guys. None of these guys are second rounders.
Yeah.
What's all this? Like, so like if I'm picking at 14 versus picking at 18, I'm going to have still another chance to go, yeah, I don't know about this.
Maybe a better shot to get the 2 guys I want in the second round.
Yeah, like the second round is frustrating because of the way that we draft, and because if someone has to be 12th and someone has to be 13th, even if those guys, I will continue to say this, is that like the guys from about 8 to about 40 should all be ranked at about 30, right? But but we have to pick them in these orders. So I go, man, this guy, I think he'd be a really good third rounder, but I got to take him at 13. I go, that's all these guys. Every one of these guys, you think that, and then when you actually break it down to look at the value, the differences between the players suggest that is 100% correct. And look at the auction values of guys. Someone will go at 1 at like $70, and the guy that's the 13th player will go at 40, 38, and you go, okay, well, that's a crazy difference. And the guy that goes at a 30th pick will go at 29, which is $5 less than the guy that's the 13th best player. And you go, okay, well, that explains it. But we have this idea, because it's a snake and it's 12 and then it's 13 and then it's 14, that the 13th must be better than the 20th by the same amount, that first is better than 7th, and blah, 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 blah. But it's all working on our brains and numbers and screwing us around, because we're all idiots at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, your site, Basketball Monster, does a really nice job of illustrating the value of a player in one roster slot. The difference between Joel Embiid per game last year and Kevin Durant, which is basically the distance of the first round, was the same as the distance between Kevin Durant and like, who the hell was it? Like the 95th ranked player or something like that. It's an absurd jump.
How much time you got? How much time you got to Dan? Because I got a few other things that we can debate here if you want. Like you give it a bit of time.
All damn day. It's your morning. I'm just sitting around now.
Because that's true. Like, and I don't know if you saw me do it, and I've talked to you about it, about the reversal draft and third round reversal. And I did a mock draft. I did full reversal. Every round is reversed apart from round 1 the other day. And the display wasn't great on Fantrax, but whatever. I think the result was fine. But there's going to be someone that pushes back. This is an outrage. It's completely unfair against the top teams because there's going to be always differences between the first round and the first pick and the last pick in every other round. But the difference is incredibly huge. And the easy way to quantify it is if you look at fantasy points leagues, and the first and 12th guy, it's like 15 points. And then the 25th and 36th is 3 points. And 37 to 48 is 1 point. And 49th to 60th is 1.5 points. And the gaps they're not there. They don't exist. You're talking 50 spots difference at some spots before you get to the difference between 1 and 12. Yep. And this idea that it gets completely unfair to that person picking first because they pick last in every other round is just like, it's like taking away the privileges that someone gets and makes them the same as somebody else. And you go, that's completely unfair. You're discriminating against me now because I'd pick one and you made me the same as everybody else when I'm better. And that's that's one of those ones where, like, again, it's mindset change. It's just what you're used to, and you go, well, this is definitely wrong and terrible and unfair. And we try and break those things, which is really hard when default settings do the opposite.
Yeah, it almost feels like you'd need to, like, the fastest way would be to just like take away the second round pick of the first couple of teams. But I mean, obviously they'd have a revolt if anybody tried to do that. But that would be the quick way to wipe it out. Like, you just don't get your second round pick, jump right over you.
Then you can, in round 3, you can pick 25 and 26 or whatever. There are ways to do it, and you don't want to get into too specific of those things because, like, each year the valuation differences change slightly. Like, they change slightly, but as a general rule, we have known this for years. There are 7 or 6 or 9 or 8 really strong first round guys, or 5 or whatever. And there's 30 guys you could fit into the next area where the difference between them is this guy shoots 40% from 3 and this guy shoots 38. Therefore, his threes go from 2.5 to 2.2 and his scoring goes from 26 to 23 and he drops 30 spots. And you go, okay, well, what's actually different? Well, not very much, but that's how small the margins become in those areas, and understanding how rankings and ratings are produced and what goes into them and where those numbers come from and how small the changes are that impact it. You understand that, like, I feel like I'm just like ranting all these thoughts out. Like, part of my idea of, like, we talk about perfect pairings, like, there's nothing. Like, I could tell you 20 guys that I could add onto this spot here that would make sense, because the differences between some of these players are so small and can be so variable that there are many different ways you can go, and it's about an accumulation of smart picks versus the one specific option only at that area. But that's I was going to say it's a discussion for another time, but it's a discussion for this time. But I think there's a lot of, you said you wanted to talk strategies, a lot of that in there. And the last strategy thing I wanted to talk to you about, Dan, because I hear you mention this often, is you talk about how you often punt points, right? And it's a strategy that many casual people don't look at, and they don't pay attention to the scoring as much. And that is true. That is one of those things. One of the reasons why, even like you said, like, you started with Embiid and you ended up punting points, and you always find yourself drifting into punting points. Why do you think you end up drifting into punting points?
I honestly think maybe my love for the known makes it the direction I go. I don't think it's an aversion to points as much as it is like guys that I know what they do that consistently outperform their draft position tend to be slightly lower scoring guys, or guys that have been around for a while and are trending either flat or even slightly down. And everybody else is kind of hunting for the big shiny guy who's going to be the next dude who scores 25, 26 points. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just find the game easier if I take all these guys and I'm like, oh, I don't know what the hell this dude's doing here. He's going to beat this by 15 slots. I'm just going to take him. Well, the reason he's there is because everybody wants points and he scores 4 less than the other guys around him. And then suddenly I have a team where they're all efficient and they all get steals and blocks and boards and assists, and some of them even hit 3-pointers on a decent percentage. but they're all scoring like 12 points a game. And that's just where I end up. Like, people ask why I like Tobias Harris. That's the answer. I know what he's going to do. I know it's not going to be exciting, but I know he's not going to hurt me in many places either. And I don't know, there's like 1,000 different ways to do this, but that's the direction I always end up gravitating.
That's interesting. You know what not what I think, because I'm not telling you why you do certain things, but this is the thing that I've found and studied over years, is that there are every player and every category is intertwined, right? There's always something that we talk about, big man stats or small stats or guard stats, right? That's a common thing that we talk about. The two most tightly correlated stats with each other are assists and turnovers. Yes. So if you get more assists, you get more turnovers. That is a general rule.
Correct.
The second most tightly correlated thing, almost exactly the same, is points and turnovers. And they are so far above. They are basically a straight line in terms of when your points go up, your turnovers go up. And the same as it's basically a straight line. So that because you do place a focus on turnovers and keeping your turnovers low, your points are just naturally going to be lower.
Yeah.
And that is going to be how we say, I've always find myself seeing my points dip in the middle of a draft, because if you focus on turnovers and you want to keep them low, your points, it'll be very hard to keep them high. And it's the same thing if you say, well, I'm really focusing on my turnovers. Often, I'm sure you'll find at times that your assists can drop down as well, because those things they're one-to-one things. Unless you are just drafting people from the Jones family, you're going to have a pretty strong like assist and turnover. Like if one goes up, the other goes up in a straight line.
Well, you know me and Chris Paul for a half decade was the old man squad, one of the logos, and he was a great assist to turnover guy. So there was a way to kind of like thread that needle, but not really a way to thread the points needle while also
it's really hard to do.
I'm not trying to necessarily dominate turnovers. I tend to avoid the guys who are at like 3.5, whatever, after the first couple. I mean, first couple of rounds, it doesn't matter. All those guys are high turnover dudes for the most part. Sometimes I'll land on an Anthony Davis or like a Tyrese Halliburton, who's a great assist to turnover guy early. And everybody that looks at Halliburton is thinking punt points now, but like that, I think, is part of the reason that I end up there as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing also, is that sometimes that can be a hard thing for people to get their head around, because they know that they took Joel Embiid, like you said, in round one, and he scores 35 points a game. You go, how can I possibly punt points if I've got the leading scorer in the NBA? Because you don't have a choice in that first round, really. Everyone is going to be a pretty big scorer as a general rule. So you can't avoid that part of it, like with the way that drafts go. You're not going to say, well, let's go with Rudy Gobert at 10. And I'll take Draymond at 12 and we're ready to go. Like you can't, I know those picks don't really align with the same team, but like it is a hard thing to look at, because that is again a common thing. People go, well, I can't waste this. I just said it here. I can't waste Wembanyama's blocks. I've got to make sure that my first round pick and his strengths are really built on. So when you're taking every one of these guys in round one, again, with the exception of Halliburton, probably everyone else is going to be high 20s in scoring, probably 30s. And you're going to go, well, I can't waste those points. I can't do that. And that's where punting points becomes a harder thing for most people to wrap their head around, I guess.
But at the same time, because like you just said, a lot of those guys are pretty close to the same number. It's not like you're really wasting them anymore. You're just like, you're even with most of these other teams. It's from that point forward that you start to rethink it. And the nice thing about Embiid, and this is something that I think Adam Stock brought up on one of our shows. He was like, well, actually, like common misconception about pump points, like you want high scorers early, provided they have great field goal and free throw percentage.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Because you have to lock in that high efficiency. Because later on, you're going to get some 3-pointers. And those guys, even the good ones, are probably going to shoot 46%. But they're taking 9-10 shots a game. Doesn't do much damage after you've got Embiid or Shea or whoever else we're looking at in the early going. Jokic is obviously a really nice one. Who I know, Jokic scored 26 points. I don't give a crap. Dude was at 58% from the field and 82 at the foul line, and Embiid's kind of the same general idea. This is awesome. I had no plans for this, but this is a great track for us. Your day has just begun, and I already feel like I've chewed up too much of it, but I thank you so much for doing more on this. This is the type of stuff that honestly I think is, I don't know for you, but for me, this is the really fun stuff, because we go over names all the time. We've talked about every name in the NBA 900 times leading up to the season, but thinking through the nuances of how to build a team and how to think about numbers and how they match. This is the stuff that kind of makes the makes the shtick so hard is the yeah, I can tie it all together back to the beginning of the show. Is this the stuff that's more fun for you? I hope so.
Yeah, like I like talking about players and their individual numbers. I'm very much, the further I've gotten into doing this, is understand that there's very, very little that is absolutely just like set, that this has to be this guy over this guy, and this has to happen. It's all a big mix. It's all a big, well, if I take this guy, then I go to this one, then I can take one of these 10 guys and one of these 7 guys. And how do I structure that? Then how do I adjust that? And how do I move it? It's all bits and pieces. There's very little, what a terrible pick. There can be terrible picks. That is true. But it's very much of a level of nuance that doesn't always get approached, I think.
Big freaking Justice. I don't know how we got him on the pod. He's a very famous child that I've never heard of until today. He's Josh Lloyd. He is the host of Locked On Fantasy Basketball. He is the lead analyst over at Basketball Monster, which, by the way, is the page that I'm showing on the screen so everybody can see the value column we were talking about and that gap between Embiid and Kevin Durant last year. And I'll just scroll slowly while I thank Josh once again for carving out an extra long segment of the day. I'm still going, by the way. The distance between Embiid and Durant, I'm still going. There we go. It's about the distance between Durant and Klay Thompson last year. Woof. Or KCP, if and I know I am sometimes, if you're into that sort of thing. Josh, dude, seriously, thank you so much for doing the double length show. This is awesome.
No worries, man. Easy to do.
Man, I'm just like, not that I'm like in a state of awe. I love doing that type of show. And that comes up organically sometimes. Sometimes I'm like trying to, I'm not talking about Josh, I'm talking about on any topic. Like sometimes I'll try to really force a show that way, but it just feels so I don't know. It gets my juices flowing in a way that I hope does for all of you viewers and listeners as well. Just really getting into the strategy of how to approach a draft, how to approach a fantasy team, how to approach the game that we all play. This is a freaking game, but we have so much fun with it, and we get so locked in on these topics, and that's fine. Like, you know, I'm going to do shows about it, and he's going to do shows about it, and the sharpest folks are going to have articles and topics that cover all of the sort of rigid names and tiers and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's a puzzle, and you like it. You shake it up at the beginning, and these are all the different ways you can put it together. But one of those last points that he was making about just this gap, and that segues into another discussion, the one that we had with Adam Stock a couple weeks ago, of how do you close that gap between the first pick and the 12th pick. Now, obviously, you don't know who the first ranked player is going to be at the end of the year. We have an idea of who the top 3, 4, 5 guys is going to be, and generally we're pretty close on that, but we're not going to get them all every time. And obviously, leagues are not going to just implement all-round reversal or the kinds of things that Josh is working on to try to help fix these problems. So your job as a player is, in the interim, how do you take a player like a Trae Young or a Kevin Durant, or if you want to go a little earlier, like a Tyrese Halliburton in these drafts, and compete with Victor Wembanyama teams, compete with Nikola Jokic teams? And that's when you get into this punting idea. And I'll just flip some numbers around here. Like, if you punt points, just looking at the top of the board, Tyrese Halliburton, you can see his punt value is negative 0.01, which means he basically doesn't move on the punt board, on the punt points board, but all the guys in front of him come back to him. So now he's number 8. And Jokic is still at the top of the board, but the gap between them is cut. What else can you do to maybe bring these guys a little bit closer together? Could you punt? I don't know, not that you have to do another one, but like, let's say you're attacking turnovers. Does that give you a little bit of an advantage there? You're attacking 3-pointers as a way you have to get over the hump against this dude. You're probably not going to punt a second thing with Tyrese Halliburton, but if you did, it would be rebounds. Where does that put him? Okay, he's number 3 now. You've closed the gap. You're getting whooped by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in this particular build, but you've closed the gap on Jokic. You've closed the gap on Joel Embiid. This is the way to think through some of that stuff, which I'm not telling you guys to go out there and take Halliburton and punt 2 things. I'm just saying, as you move towards the back of a round, you're not going to get 12-round reversal to catch up on some of these big teams. You have to do other stuff. Anyway, went longer than expected because Josh was more than willing to give us all that extra time. Amazing time with the pod father himself. RedRock_B-ball if you want to go follow Josh on the socials. He is, of course, the host of LockedOn Fantasy Basketball, must listen, must watch show on the daily. He is also the lead analyst over at Basketball Monster, which was the page that I've generally thrown up on the screen when we're talking about rankings. I am Dan Baspris at Dan Baspris on social. At Old Man Squad is the feed on Twitter and TikTok. At Old Man Squad over on Instagram. I'll put those links back up on the board in just a second here. And again, please, if you have some thoughts on any of this stuff, I invite you, comment. As long as you guys keep it cool, like, I'll talk about any of this stuff. And if you guys want to try to catch Josh, I can try to ping him. We'll see if we can catch him in between things. I mean, I know he, like, I only took an hour of his day already. But hit us up in the comment section on the YouTube video. That's the easiest way to get me. And like, rate, subscribe, all that stuff on the way out. Thank you again. Awesome, super fun day here. I have lost track of what freaking day it is. It's Thursday. Yeah, it's Thursday. Tomorrow, we got a double dip. I think we got another guest on tomorrow. What is that? The 27th? Yeah, Raphael Johnson. So we can just talk about that Giannis stuff that we covered. We got Raf tomorrow. And then we'll probably do... Hey, the ESPN board is updated. Probably talk about that a little bit tomorrow as well. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everyone. I'm Dan for Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball.